Heard AOC say this recently, that no one achieves substantial wealth without somehow or another victimizing other people.
But here's the truth. You're not going to get health care to these people by threatening to tax and eat the rich. You raise billionaires' taxes, they just leave the state. Or they leave the country. Or in some cases, the planet.
Joe Rogan is pushing back hard against the argument that America's wealthiest individuals built their fortunes on stolen ground. According to Rogan, politicians like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders have increasingly framed extreme wealth as something inherently suspicious, rather than as a reflection of success, innovation, or hard work. He argues that this perspective challenges one of the core ideas behind the American dream, the belief that anyone, regardless of their background, can achieve extraordinary success through dedication and opportunity. Rogan's response was passionate, direct, and sparked a conversation that continues to divide public opinion.
Kind of am.
You are.
I kind of am,
yeah.
In some weird way. I've become a businessman.
Yeah.
But this idea that it's easy to become a billionaire and that these billionaires somehow or another are the problem because they're not paying their fair share is so weird that's a narrative that actually gets pushed through when you look at the actual numbers of the tax base and how much they contribute and how many jobs they provide. And yeah, they make more money than everybody else, right? You could do that too. It's like this is one of the things that America is really good at. You can come from nothing and become incredibly wealthy if you figure something out and go. And we just assume that everybody who makes an incredible amount of money stole.
Rogan strongly rejects the idea that every billionaire or highly successful entrepreneur reached the top through dishonesty or exploitation. While acknowledging that undesirable actors exist, he argues that painting all wealthy people with the same brush oversimplifies a much more complicated reality. Progressive leaders such as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Zohran Mamdani, and Bernie Sanders often question how large fortunes are accumulated and whether the wealthy contribute enough in taxes. Rogan believes that this narrative overlooks important facts. For example, the highest earners in the United States contribute a substantial portion of federal income tax revenue, a reality that complicates the claim that the wealthy are avoiding their responsibilities altogether.
This is a narrative that gets pushed along Democratic socialists, that no one achieves that. I think I literally heard AOC say this recently, that no one achieves substantial wealth without somehow or another victimizing other people.
Yeah. And then Jeff Bezos is the obvious counterexample, which is like every time you do the one click and the thing gets delivered to you 2 hours later at the cheapest possible price, saving you and your family a lot of time and money.
But at the expense of small mom and pop stores, allegedly.
Although a lot of them sell on Amazon, a lot of small businesses sell on Amazon.
At the heart of Rogan's argument is a simple belief: America rewards people who create value. Whether someone develops a groundbreaking product, launches a useful service, or introduces an innovative idea, the market often rewards those contributions. Supporters of free market capitalism see this aspect as one of the system's greatest strengths. Rogan points to figures like Jeff Bezos as an example. Critics often focus on Amazon's impact on traditional retail, but supporters argue that the company also created new opportunities for countless small businesses. Through Amazon's marketplace, entrepreneurs gained access to customers around the world, allowing them to grow beyond the limitations of local markets. From this perspective, Amazon became not just a retail giant, but also a platform that expanded economic opportunity for many smaller sellers.
Compare and contrast to other countries that have more draconian policies in the direction that those folks are suggesting. And so Europe in particular, many European countries have a much more draconian, are much even more hostile to business, and the result is they are much poorer. Their slower growth are actually shrinking. The people there are much less well off. There's much less funding for social programs, and so you can also do the cross. The
conversation then shifts to broader economic policy. Rogan's guest argues that history shows how excessive regulations and high taxation can discourage business growth and entrepreneurship. According to this view, countries that make it difficult to start, grow, or profit from businesses often experience slower economic growth over time. Entrepreneurs take significant risks when building companies, investing years of effort, money, and energy into uncertain ventures. When taxes and regulations become too burdensome, critics argue that the incentives to innovate and create jobs begin to weaken. As a result, investment and talent may move toward places that offer greater economic freedom and opportunity.
If you add in state tax, local sales, property fees, Obamacare, probably almost 60% of what I earn. That's a lot. And I still wouldn't mind if Bernie Sanders would stop saying the rich don't pay taxes. And while I'm sure the super rich with their army of accountants and corporate loopholes get away with, us regular rich people pay a of taxes. And who stands up and gives us a pat on the back? Nobody, that's who.
Bill Maher echoed similar concerns and added a personal perspective to the discussion. Maher explained that a significant portion of his income goes toward taxes, arguing that many high-income earners already contribute heavily to government revenue. His comments challenged the popular perception that wealthy Americans pay little or nothing in taxes. Maher's position is particularly notable because he is often associated with liberal viewpoints, making his criticism of certain progressive tax arguments stand out even more. For supporters of Rogan's perspective, Maher's experience reinforces the belief that many wealthy individuals already shoulder a disproportionate share of the tax burden, and that the broader conversation deserves a more balanced and nuanced examination.
Pay 72% of all federal income taxes, and the bottom half, 3%. The Democratic Socialists talk about socialism like we don't already have a lot. Social Security, unemployment, Medicare, nutritional assistance, Medicaid, Obamacare, disability, housing subsidies. Again, not against it, just the same question. How can you be soaking the rich and failing the poor?
Bill Maher then raises a question that cuts to the core of the progressive tax debate. If the wealthy aren't paying enough, what has happened to the massive amounts of tax revenue already being collected? It's a question that resonates with many Americans. According to Maher, billions of dollars flow into government programs every year, yet the results often fall short of expectations. He points to large-scale initiatives such as the Affordable Care Act, which was promoted as a way to expand access to health care. While supporters argue it has helped millions gain coverage, critics contend that many people still struggle with affordability and access. Maher's broader argument is that before demanding higher taxes, policymakers should also be held accountable for how existing funds are spent and whether those investments are delivering meaningful results.
Buy happiness, but it sure can buy healthiness. Half the country can buy access to concierge doctors, specialists, new treatments, personal trainers, nutritionists, private chefs, and whatever Gwyneth Paltrow is putting in her vagina. And the other half has the place I was just talking about, remote area medical, the pop-up healthcare clinic that rolls into town once a year like a county fair, except instead of riding the tilt-a-whirl, a volunteer doctor pulls your infected tooth. And the saddest thing in the 60 Minutes piece is that nothing has changed since they covered it in 2008.
The discussion then turns to broader concerns about public services and government efficiency. Critics argue that despite enormous spending, many Americans continue to face significant challenges when it comes to healthcare, housing, and infrastructure. California often becomes a focal point in these debates. As one of the nation's highest tax states, it is frequently cited by both supporters and critics of progressive policies. Advocates point to its strong economy and innovation, while opponents highlight issues such as homelessness, rising living costs, and delayed infrastructure projects. The question raised in the conversation is whether higher tax revenues are translating into the level of public improvements citizens expect to see.
You're not going to get health care to these people by threatening to tax and eat the rich. You raise billionaires' taxes, they just leave the state. Or they leave the country. Or in some cases, the planet.
Maher argues that tax policy can have unintended consequences when it becomes too aggressive. He points to states such as New York and California, where some high-income residents and businesses have relocated to places like Florida and Texas. Supporters of lower tax policies see this migration as evidence that individuals and companies respond to economic incentives. They argue that when investment and entrepreneurship move elsewhere, states risk losing jobs, economic activity, and future tax revenue. Maher's concern is not rooted in partisan politics, but in what he views as the practical consequences of policies that fail to account for human behavior and economic realities.
You know, he had a good idea recently that might be apropos here. During the recent government shutdown, he volunteered to pay all the TSA workers himself, with couch money. That's how super rich our super rich are. They can single-handedly fund entire government programs. Okay, so let's make that a thing. The Adopt a Cause Challenge for
Using his trademark humor, Monher expands on another aspect of the debate: philanthropy. Many wealthy individuals contribute significant amounts of money to hospitals, universities, scientific research, and charitable organizations. Mayer argues that these voluntary contributions can have a meaningful impact on society and that they are often overlooked in discussions about wealth and taxation. At the same time, critics of this viewpoint contend that public services should not rely on charitable giving alone. Regardless of where one stands, the broader point is that voters are increasingly evaluating whether political promises are translating into real-world results. As economic concerns continue to shape public opinion, these debates are likely to remain front and center in future elections.
Get the middleman, the government and the healthcare bureaucracies that for whatever reason, no matter how much they take in, never seem to get enough to the people, and just shame the billionaires into doing it directly because they have all the money and noblesse oblige isn't.
Ultimately, the conversation between Joe Rogan, Bill Maher, and their guests highlights a larger debate about wealth, taxation, economic growth, and government responsibility. Supporters of Rogan's perspective argue that entrepreneurs create opportunities, drive innovation, and contribute heavily to tax revenues. They believe that excessive taxation and regulation can discourage investment and slow economic growth. Critics, on the other hand, argue that stronger public programs and a more progressive tax system are necessary to address inequality and ensure broader economic security. What remains clear is that these issues are far from settled. As voters continue to weigh competing visions for the future, the conversation around taxes, opportunity, and economic fairness will remain one of the most important political discussions in America.